As Elul begins, we often think repentance means tightening control, doubling down on attention, praying with flawless kavanah. Rosh Hashanah is called Yom HaZikaron, a day of remembrance, where there is no forgetfulness before the throne of your glory. Yet Parshat Teitze insists, sometimes the mitzvah happens when you forget, when you look away, when you let go. Suddenly Torah suggests something different. Sometimes the holiest act is precisely when you lose focus, forget, or let go. Holiness can be found in both deliberate action and unintended accident. From recognizing the mitzvah in the sheaf you forgot, from admitting the slip-ups you never intended, holiness is not only in what we hold onto with intention, it is also in what we release. At the end of the day, when we pray to the God of remembrance, what we pray for is that God, like humans, will sometimes remember selectively. Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on your favorite podcast platform, and now on YouTube and Substack. We also publish a source sheet on Sfaria, and a link is included in the show notes. This week's parsha is Teitze. We are commanded when to regard and when to disregard lost objects. The gleanings of the threshing floor we are to leave, and the mother bird we are told to let go when we take her fledglings. Are we to conclude that which is unintentional is as important as the intentional? Join us for Intentional and Unintentional Holiness. Well, welcome, Rabbi, from Italy. You're in Pisa?
I'm in Lucca tonight. The wedding is in Lucca tomorrow, and this is such an amazing topic, and it really brings together the whole world and so many different generations. Intentional and unintentional holiness. Let's run with it. Our first one of the month of Elul.
And before we do, just a few short announcements. Rabbi, this is a very special week for us because Re'im Ahuvim, your synagogue, is making Aliyah. You're moving to the JCC of the west side of Manhattan on 76th in Amsterdam. And for the inauguration, we are having Madlik Live. We will be there in person. I will be there this coming Shabbat. And for you listeners who can make it, rest assured we are going to do different material than we are doing now, although I will give you a little tease. We are going to be talking about the language of halakha, and we are going to be discussing a few halachot today, and if we're successful, you yourself will see that halachot are literally a language, and we just have to listen. So with that, let's begin. We are in Deuteronomy 22, and it says, if you see your fellows Israelites' ox or sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. Or as Fox says, do not hide yourself from them. You must take it back to your peer. If your fellow Israelite does not live near you, or you do not know who the owner is, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your peer claims it. Then you shall give it back. You shall do the same with that person's ass. You shall do the same with that person's garment. And so too shall you do with anything that your fellow Israelite loses and you find. You must not remain indifferent. Or as Fox says, you are not allowed to hide yourself. So we have this amazing halacha. In the Hebrew, it says, v'hitalemta. You shall not hide yourself. You shall not ignore it. You shall not disappear. It's all about returning something that is lost, but also not losing yourself, not hiding from yourself. The Hebrew word of the root of halam can mean to hide yourself, usually hide the eyes from. It can mean disregard, take one's attention away. It can mean turn a deaf ear, practice concealment. And so you can see how it started me thinking, Rabbi, about presence, when we need to be present, when we have to let go of our presence. And Rashi comes up and says immediately, you shall not see any of your brother's herd go astray and hide yourself from them. Says Rashi, close his eyes tight as though one does not see it.
That's a great Rashi, right?
And, it's kind of like a few weeks ago when we were talking about, or last week when we were talking about shochad, and you commented on the literary nature that it says, because it blinds your eyes. Here too, Rashi adds that little essence of you can't close your eyes.
I just want to say all New Yorkers are very familiar with this because everybody is taught by their parents when they're a kid and they ride the New York City subways. Don't see them, right? Make it, if something happens on the subway, make it as if you don't see. That's exactly what the hitalamta means. Rashi didn't have a subway in France in the 11th century. That's exactly the same idea. We do it today. Make it as if you don't see it.
The opposite of see something, say something.
Right.
And the other part of that is don't look anybody in the eye. If you see somebody looks a little weird, don't look him in the eye. Don't establish eye contact. So, Rabbi, there couldn't be a more simple, straightforward commandment than this. You got to return somebody's lost object. You cannot hide your eyes. But the second Rashi brings up what the rabbis do here. It says, this is the plain sense of the verse. Our rabbis, however, said that the omission of the particle lo before the verb hitalamta suggests that there are times when you may hide yourself from it. In other words, it should have said lo tireh velo hitalamta, because it doesn't. There are exceptions to the rule. Of course, we know that's what the rabbis are famous for, finding the exceptions, the nuances to the rule. And it kind of reminds me of this thing of not passing over another commandment. Here you are, you have to do a mitzvah, you're walking along and you have to return something. The rabbis seem to be saying, but there are instances where you don't have to do this mitzvah. And again, everything that we're going to be talking about today is it's never 100% clear when you have to hide your eyes and when you don't hide your eyes.
Let me just explain what that case is of passing over a mitzvah. You're in shul. Many people just go to shul on Shabbat, so this doesn't happen. But for people who go to services during the week, very often there are poor people who come by and they ask for charity during services. Do you have the right to not give them charity because you are in the middle of your services? You're in the middle of davening. Ein ma'avirin al hamitzvot. Do not pass over a commandment. The fact that you're involved in one commandment doesn't exempt you for another commandment. That's a really good question, Jeffrey, because it's easy to say, I don't have to give charity. I have such intention in my prayers, I don't have to give charity. But it says, no, don't pass over a commandment.
I mean, if I remember correctly, when you put away your tefillin, you have to make sure you know where the tefillin shel rosh is and the shel yad is, because God forbid you should reach for the rosh before the yad. Then how can you put it back? You've already grabbed a mitzvah. You can't be ma'avirin al ha-mitzvah.
You're making the shel rosh feel bad, which is also amazing. You personify the tefillin, which is great.
So we're going to be talking about the language of mitzvot, but here we are deep into the weeds, Rabbi. All of these things have lessons for life too. So here we are. The Sifrei comes and explains why there are, in fact, times where you don't have to not hide your eyes, where you can hide your eyes. So it says as follows. Sometimes the Sifrei says you do ignore them, and sometimes you do not ignore them. How so? If he was a Kohen and it were in the cemetery. So you're a Kohen, you're passing by a cemetery, you see a lost object, you're not allowed to go in there. So now we add the additional thing of it's a lo sa'atase, it's a prohibitive commandment. Or if he were an elder and were it beneath his dignity. So now what happens if you're an elderly person and you see something to return? Is this within your purview or not? Or, and this is interesting, if his labor were greater than that of his neighbor. In other words, if the finder was to return the item, reimbursing him for his lost wages would cost more than the value of the item. In all of these three cases, he is exempt, it being written and you ignore. Sometimes you do ignore, sometimes you do not. Pa'amim she'ata mitalem, u'pa'amim she'ein atem mitalem. So again, the language of the halacha is telling us that, first of all, nothing is simple. And we have a verse that says you cannot hide your eyes. Sure enough, the rabbis come in and say there are times when you can hide your eyes. And then the nuance is, yes, there are times, as your parents would say when you're on the subway or elsewise, there are times where you don't look and there are times that you have to look. I love the nuance, but I also love the fact that this is not black and white. We live in a world of nuance, and the rabbis are even advertising it, showcasing it.
I'll just say, how do the rabbis know that? Because the word lamta, that you should hide your eyes, it suggests the fact that that's something to do. Not always, but why do they say it in that way? It makes it seem as if that's a reasonable reaction to things, and we have to decide when is that appropriate and when it's not appropriate.
I love it. And then the second time Rashi comments, he goes even further. When at the end of the verse it says, thou may not hide thyself, he says, you must not cover your eyes pretending not to see it. Ke'ilu eincha ra'oeh oto. So now we're talking about two different levels. When you're supposed to hide your eyes, when you're not. And do you pretend as though you don't see? Other people will be looking upon you. I just love how they can complicate such an obvious, straightforward thing. But again, it shows that everything is complicated. There are no straight and true laws. So now we get to the second halacha that talks about intentionality, oversight. And this is what we call shichacha, where you forget. And it's in Deuteronomy 24:19. And it says, when you reap the harvest in your field and overlook a sheaf in the field, do not turn back to get it. It shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, in order that your God may bless you in all of your undertakings. I love this word shichachta, shechach v'shechachta, and you forget it. So here we are almost commanding somebody, and you can imagine, Rabbi, I started by saying during Elul, we focus on kavanah, we focus on doing everything just perfectly. I can assume that there are psychological types, maybe very anal people, maybe we all have this part of ourselves that we have to do everything just right. And for those people, Elul and the high holidays is like a godsend. That's how they would love to live, where everything finds its place. And boom, out of left field, literally the field, we get this law that says, when you bring up your harvest and things drop, you have to let them go. You have to leave them for the poor. And I love the fact that when we refer to the trilogy of laws in this kind of context, there's leket, shichacha, and peah, the gleanings, the forgotten produce, and the corners of the field. These are all laws, Rabbi, that teach us, in a sense, to let go. And if you believe, Rabbi, that we do the commandments to kind of copy God, lahadmot, imitatio Dei, then in a sense, are we not saying that this is a godly trait, to sometimes just let go?
Yeah, no, for sure. I thought you were going to point out, which is of course also true, that we call this one shikha. We name it after the fact that you forgot it, right? Leket means gleanings and peah means the corners. But shikha, can you imagine referring to a law, an agricultural law, as the thing that you forgot? It shows the centrality of forgetting.
It does. And because we are in the high holidays, I said to myself, I've heard that word shichacha before. And in the Siddur, when we talk about Zichronot and Malchiot and Shofrot, we talk about the trilogy of remembering of Shofar and the kings. There is this beautiful saying that says, Ki ein shichacha lifnei kisei kvodecha, that there is no forgetting before God's holy throne. And we call Rosh Hashanah Yom HaZikaron. It is the day of remembering. And so what I wanted to explore here is, are we truly trying to imitate God, or are we trying to project onto God and say, even on Yom HaZikaron, we want you to do what you tell us to do, which is to sometimes let go and be a little selective in your memory. If you're harvesting and a few shafts get away from you, that is the mitzvah of shichacha. And again, we say in the Zichronot, there is no forgetfulness before the throne of glory. And in the Sefaria notes, I have it quoted in full. And then, Rabbi, we do something amazing. We start to list all of the things we want God to remember. And big surprise, Rabbi, in that list is not the golden calf. In that list is not Kerach. In that list is not bitter waters. We say to God, Ki zocher kol nishkachot, you remember everything that has been forgiven. Ve'ein shichacha lefnei kisetecha. But then we get very selective in our memory. And I found a beautiful commentary in thetorah.com that says as follows: although we ask God to remember in the Zichronot blessing, we are not actually asking God to remember everything, both the good and the bad. The Mishnah is explicit about this. The Mishnah says, Ein maskirin zikron malchus v'shofar shel poraniot. We don't remember anything that we got punished for. We are asking God to be selective. When we say God never forgets, we are holding up our fingers as quotation marks. Rabbi, I think there is, and I don't think I'm creating this as a drash. I really do think that there is a dialogue between this law of shichacha and what we want God to remember too. We're teaching ourselves that memory should be selective, that you don't have to remember every sheaf. Not every grain has to be harvested. You can leave things for the poor. You can have a little rachmanis. Is it drash? Maybe.
That's amazing. And I'll just say, another draft that on Rosh Hashanah, each holiday has its name in the prayer service. And Rosh Hashanah is not called Rosh Hashanah in the service. It's called Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance. That is our obsession on Rosh Hashanah. And exactly like you said, Jeffrey, it's the balance between the fact that's scary. God doesn't forget anything is scary. But if God didn't remember anything, we also would be sunk. So you see that, right, Jeffrey? That's a very delicate balance. He can't remember everything, but he has to remember something. And that's the challenge of Rosh Hashanah, of finding the sweet spot.
Absolutely. So the professor, Mark Tzvi Bretler, has an article in thetorah.com. It's called Zichronot, Asking Omniscient God to Remember. Do we really want God to remember all that we did? And he writes, instead, we are asking God use selective memory, a feature that is well documented in scientific literature, where it is sometimes called selective forgetting. We ask, for example, God to recall our outcry in Egypt, the ancestral covenant, his compassion, Israel's early loyalty to God, itself a very selective presentation of the wilderness period, and many other positive things in past. By implication, we are asking God not to remember Israel's past misdeeds, such as the golden calf, the sin of the scouts, and our own personal sins. The depiction of God as remembering selectively is very striking. Usually we think of religion as claiming claiming that people must be godlike, but this prayer insists that God be human-like. God, like a loving parent, should remember the good and overlook or even forget the bad. He's not tying into shichacha, but he is saying this should be a mitzvah where God is copying us. It is indeed much easier.
That's brilliant, right? That's absolutely brilliant that on Rosh Hashanah, all year long, we try to be like God. But on Rosh Hashanah, we ask God to be like us.
Be like us, following God's commandments. Be like us when we harvest the wheat, and God told us you can let go of a few grains. It is indeed much easier to change our ways if we imagine that God, like us, engages in selective memory and might be convinced to forget the wrongs we have done in the previous year. So quite ironically, on one level, the real message of the festival's early name of Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Remembrance, is that we hope that God will indeed forget. I just thought that was wonderful. And again, especially in light.
Great. Professor Brettner was fantastic. And it really identifies, such a fundamental point in Rosh Hashanah.
So, and again, I will argue that the mitzvah of shichacha for every one of us, but there are clearly those of us who want to put every peg into every hole and it must be difficult to go to the harvest and to let those grains drop. It must be difficult to plow your field and leave the corners. And I do think that the halacha itself has a language that if we listen to it, it's teaching us something. And I think this might very well be the primary lesson that we all need to be a little understanding and a little forgiving. And that's why it goes right to the poor and the widow and those who are less fortunate just for the love of God that could be you walking there. I think it is in the message.
I think there's no question. Well, take it back to the beginning. And it's in human nature that if you see somebody having trouble on West End Avenue, you tend to look away. You tend to say, I don't want to get involved. It requires a special effort to say, I'm going to get involved. Right? So in both cases, the Torah comes to tell you need to fight the inclination to do what's right.
And there are no easy answers. You've got to make that decision each time. So now we're getting to a third halacha in our parsha. And this is in Deuteronomy 22:6. It says, if along the road you chance upon a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs, and the mother's sitting over the fledglings or on the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. Let the mother go and take only the young, in order that you may fare well and have a long life. So there are two things going on here. Number one, if you chance upon a bird's nest is intriguing. This serendipity of this commandment, this happenstance. And then what is the lesson here too? Is it similar to the lesson of leaving the sheaves? We are leaving something. If you're a hunter, Rabbi, the idea is you get it all. You had a good day. I got the mother, I got the birds, I got the whole harvest. So Rashi says, if a bird's nest chance to be before thee, he writes, if it chance to be, this excludes that which is already at hand in thy court. So in other words, what exactly that means, I'm not sure of, Rabbi. Maybe if you're a farmer, but the idea is that this chance, this serendipitous part of this commandment is intrinsic to it. And I love that too, because if we're learning anything about intentionality or lack thereof, the one thing that ruins every unintentional is an unintentional situation when it comes to you from left field.
I just want to say, what does it mean by chance? By chance means that, if it's in your backyard and you can have a family meeting about how to handle it, that's not what the Torah is talking about. The Torah is talking about by chance. You have to make a decision on the spur of the moment. That's what you said. That's about, turning your eyes away from something that goes wrong on West End Avenue.
I love it. I love it. The Ibn Ezra says the word yikar, chance, is similar to nikro nikrete, as it happened by chance. These words have the meaning of chance It is close in meaning to meet. A mikra can also be a meeting between two people. And I love that too, because most of what we learn in life is not what we intended to learn. It's that chance meeting, whether it's interpersonal or whether it's preparing for a podcast and you stumble across a commentary that you've never heard of before. We have to be open to those experiences. And then we have a very long and famous Ramban. We're not going to quote it in full. For those of you who are interested in the whole concept of ta'amei mitzvot, that there are meanings and reasons for commandments, I suggest that you read it. But he gets into a number of lessons here. And the first thing that he says is an environmental one. He says, now he who kills the dam and the yug in one day, or takes them when they are free to fly, as though he cuts off that species. So I love that. We have a medieval environmentalist here. He also talks about the moral lesson for us. You should not have a cruel heart and be discompassionate. Even if what you're doing is right, even if it is within your rights, we shouldn't do things like destroy a whole family that could make our souls tough and unfeeling. And again, too, Rabbi, we're going to be discussing it this Shabbat, but what he's talking about is the language of the mitzvot, that the mitzvah is teaching us something. We learn it by seeing it, by doing it. It's not something that you have to find in a commentary. And he says it is for our good. And what he is really, I think, teaching us is the lesson of all of the commandments that we've looked at today, which is that there is a language there. There are things that we can learn from them in a meeting. As we meet them by bimikra, we can learn. In this particular case, what we're learning is about the serendipity of life. What we're learning about is the letting go. We're not in total control, and we are taught to be not in total control by a God who plays the game as if he's not in total control. He says he's all knowing. He says he's all remembering, and he chooses to remember selectively. This is the lesson that we are getting from God, and that we then can teach and learn for those who are dependent on us, whether it's the widow, whether then it's the poor. I think grouping these commandments together gives us so much to think about in terms of that which is unintentioned. And so I'll finish with the al-chaitz. There are many al-chaitz that we say on Yom Kippur about things that we've done. We haven't honored our parents. We haven't spoken the truth. But in terms of what we discussed today, al-chaitz shechatanu lefanecho b'zadon u b'shgaga, for those things that we did intentionally and unintentionally. And I think both of them can be flipped, because there are also mitzvot that we need to do that are based on the unintentionality of the moment and the opportunities that arise from there. I think it's a wonderful way to look at the season that we're in, Elul, and to open it up so that it's not simply putting a round peg into a round hole.
I think it's fantastic. And of course, the idea of sinning unintentionally, of committing a crime unintentionally, that we understand the difference between murder and manslaughter and all those things. But the idea that in Judaism, the commandment, a positive commandment, can also be intentional, unintentional, that's great.
Fantastic. Well, I hope all of you will join us if you're in New York City this coming Shabbat, 344 Amsterdam Avenue, 76th in Amsterdam, Re'im Ahuvim. Services start at 9:30, and we will have Madlik live at 11:15. Hope to see you all there. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.